And we are live, Senators.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is the second day of February 2022, officially Groundhog Day. And in case you haven't heard, we're due for at least 6 more weeks of winter. Here in the kingdom, it's probably 8 weeks, but we'll take it as it comes. We are talking about the capital bill, and specifically this afternoon, probably section 3 for the most part. But we're going to talk about some other things as well. I am Joe Benning, your host for this afternoon's festivities. I represent the Caledonia County District and I chair this committee. We also have on the screen, going across the screen and my screen anyway, Senator Mazza from Colchester Grand Isle, Senator McCormick from Windsor County, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, and Senator Parent from Franklin County. To all of you who are joining us this afternoon, I give this spiel every time we come online. As you know, we are not only remote, but we are also on YouTube. There is a YouTube audience that actually appears for these conversations. I have no idea who they actually are, but for the benefit of those who are on the YouTube screen watching, I am going to presume that some of them, if not most of them, have never been through the committee process before and are here to try to learn how their government actually works. So for the benefit of those folks who have never heard us talking about subjects, I'm going to ask every witness to do a couple of things. First, to identify themselves and let us know a little bit about who you are and how you fit into the government process. And then, more importantly, as you are giving testimony, to keep the conversation at a level that you think virtually anybody who's never been involved in these conversations will understand. There may come a point when you are discussing your particular topic that for me, I get a red flag going off in my head saying, well, perhaps the YouTube audience does not understand what's being talked about here. So I may jump in and interrupt you. It's not to be rude. I just want to make sure that we're talking in a language that virtually everybody watching can understand. Having said all that, I have been specifically asked to let the Department of Corrections go first because they have some other commitments that I understand they need to be involved in this afternoon. And I have a whole lot of witnesses who are lined up this afternoon. I don't know if everybody is going to be talking, but I'll start off with the Commissioner of the Department of Corrections, Commissioner Demmel. Welcome back to Senate Institutions. And I'm going to let you lead off the conversation as you choose, and then we'll talk about who else may want to participate in that conversation. And perhaps you want to tee up the list of contributors this afternoon, and we can go from there. But welcome back to Senate Institutions, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, good afternoon, Senator Benning, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Nick Demmel. I'm the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections. And we do have a fair number of staff with us today who are subject matter experts on a lot of the topics that you had outlined in your agenda. And we wanted to make sure that we were responsive and had the right folks in the room for you. So I think probably the easiest thing to do is, as folks step up to testify on any of these topics, they can introduce themselves, explain their role in line with some of the comments that you made at the beginning, Senator. In looking at the agenda today, there are a couple of key and very timely issues that you've asked us to come and discuss with you. I think the first one that we can talk about is the Women's Correctional Facility and where we are in that process, and certainly would welcome a discussion with this committee about that as we move down that road. For this, I'm going to turn to our Chief of Operations, Al Cormier, and he can share his position, what that means in the department, and then certainly talk about where we are in the process with the planning for a future women's facility.
So before you begin, Al, and I should note, Commissioner, just for your benefit, that Al and I go way back. I interrupt him all the time. He interrupts me. So this is kind of not unusual. But Al, before you begin, I just want to tee up the conversation by pointing out for our YouTube listeners that the women's facility in Chittenden County has long been a source of concern not just for the Department of Corrections, but also for the various legislative committees that are associated with that. And we have been talking about what to do to try to replace that facility and turn a page, if you will, on how women are treated in this state. That conversation is not only involved with this committee, but also with the policy committees that are making decisions. And this has been an ongoing conversation in several different quarters. Al, it would be very helpful if you could bring us up to speed on where things are from your perspective. And again, welcome to Senate Institutions.
Good afternoon, Senator, and thank you. Al Cormier, Chief of Operations for the Department of Corrections. So as you've said, the women's facility has been a topic of conversation in this committee and others as well. Last session, we presented to you with the HOK study, the feasibility study that was conducted around all correctional facilities, with several options given in that report as to the future of our correctional system and the buildings and where we may see ourselves with not only the women's facility, but also our male facilities. The focus being the women's facility. The Chittenden facility is a facility that was constructed back in the early 70s. It's a facility with a significant amount of deferred maintenance that is certainly in need of repair and most certainly replacement as well. The DRM report that was issued, I think it's 2 years ago now, highlighted some of the areas of concern in that facility. Our department has been working closely with BGS on the development of the new RFP to go out for the second phase of the feasibility study. We've also been working closely with the state of Maine and their Department of Corrections and the women's reentry facility that they have in that state. We've taken away a lot of good information from that department. I think they're doing some really good innovative programming in that facility and something that we would certainly like to model both from a design phase of that facility as well as the programming that they're offering and reentry components. We visited Maine. Our teams continue to communicate on a regular basis. Commissioner Fitch and some of her team members visited Maine with us last year. And as we move forward with the women's facility and the reentry facility, I think we're at an interesting juncture here, and I'm hoping that the next phase of this study will help move us along. But is it a reentry facility first and then a correctional facility, or is it a correctional facility and a reentry facility? So those are some of the dynamics we're working with right now as we move forward with this project. But our hope is to build eventually a new women's facility and reentry facility that provides services, that provides an environment that is humanizing, that is more akin to a college campus or a college dormitory style living than it is a correctional facility living. What we've seen in Maine and what we've seen in other female correctional facilities across the country is from the mental health and the reentry components of rehabilitation. That's really where we need to be focused, is humanizing the experience and providing these women with the services and potential vocational training to get them employed when they get out the door and have the full wraparound services and support that they deserve when they reenter society. And we want to stay away from as much idle time as we can while they're inside as well.
Al, could you tell me how many women are currently lodged in Chittenden?
Right now, we're hovering right around 94, I believe.
And how is that demographic in comparison to a year ago?
Well, you can say 2 years ago, pre-COVID, we were roughly around 140 individuals that were lodged in Chittenden. So we have seen a drastic reduction in the population there. A lot of that was done with, as we moved into COVID and trying to reduce the population to mitigate some of the potential spread of COVID inside of our facilities, working with the court as well as our own reentry plans with furlough population and so forth.
So I know that there's been a serious effort to reduce the population. Has there been any hiccups with that?
Well, reentry housing is certainly an issue for a majority of the population. There's certainly a housing crisis for not only incarcerated individuals, but I think all individuals in the state of Vermont right now. There's not a lot of available housing anywhere right now. So housing is a major component for us. And then the job readiness component, getting people ready in the wraparound services. Designated agencies in the community are certainly feeling the staffing crisis much like we are. So for those designated agencies to be able to provide the necessary substance abuse services, mental health services, and so forth is also impacting the success of our folks getting out.
What is it that is going to be required in order to get some new brick and mortar delivered here? I mean, if I take a look for a moment at Woodside, we finally came to the conclusion we're going to tear it down and move on to something different. We obviously have some obstacles now placed in front of us that may not have been anticipated. But with respect to the women's facility, are we at that point where we literally just have to line up bulldozers and push the issue over the edge, so to speak?
I wish it was that simple, but I think I'll turn that one over to Commissioner Fitch to take as far as the next steps in the process.
Okay. Commissioner Fitch, I know you're chomping at the bit to come back and join us. My list has a different list of characters in the order that I'm reading, so forgive me if I'm just looking now to Matt D'Agostino, and I don't know whether, Matt, you have anything you want to present that falls in line with the list that I have in front of me. I hope you've all had a chance to see who's on board in what order, but I'm going to go right down that list until somebody tells me otherwise. So Matt, welcome back to Senate Institutions.
Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, everyone. For the record, Matt D'Agostino, Interim Deputy Commissioner for Corrections. No, sorry, I don't think there's anything that I could add to this particular topic. I think I would defer to Commissioner Fitch as well in terms of kind of next steps, the question that was asked.
Commissioner Fitch, we're rapidly working towards you at this rate. Al, I cut you off initially. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add to the conversation before we continued on.
No, I think one thing to add is you asked a question around the current population, and I know one of the hot topics as we do move forward in this project is what size facility are we going to need to be looking at, and that's kind of the $1 million question for us is what size, how many beds. Nationally, the model that agencies are looking at, and in accordance with ACA standards, American Correctional Association standards, is somewhere from a 50 to 20% bed vacancy rate for any new facility. The concern is with adding more beds, people think we're just adding beds to fill beds, and that's not our intent at all. But we have some work to do with our classification system and our current population and some looking at trends in our population to determine what is the best size of a facility, with a correctional facility and a reentry facility. Maine is a completely different system than ours as far as the state system. Plus, they have numerous county systems for the detainee population. They have a 100-bed reentry facility and approximately another 100 beds in their main building. That's nowhere near where we're going to need to be, but we are working to try to figure that out. And that'll be a big piece of the next steps in the process is what size building are we going to be looking at. With a current detainee population of around 40, we have to think about them. We have a significant number of females that are incarcerated for murder in Vermont. Those are not people that we're probably going to be looking in at a reentry facility anytime in the near future, but we do need to think about reentry and release planning for that population as well. As you know, not everybody remains in jail for their entire life, but we need to start thinking about what that size will be moving forward, and that's going to be a big piece for us.
So one of the frustrating things about being on a committee like this in the citizen legislature is that we bring up these topics, we end up with studies. Getting from the study phase through the construction phase is a maddening process for civilians who are not really on top of things as far as how this all works. But I'm glad to hear that the demographics are down. That is certainly helpful. But I just want to express as chair of this committee that I've been hearing this conversation for a long time, and I'm still worried about not getting through the process of actually building something in order for these remaining women to get through the system as we all hope they would be. Committee, anybody have any questions thus far? I don't want to go too far ahead. I don't see anybody chomping at the bit. Al, thanks for coming back, and I'm sure we're going to have you back again.
Thank you.
I'm skipping over Matt D'Agostino to Matt Nault. You are the Director of Facilities. What, if anything, would you like to add to the conversation?
Hi, good afternoon, Senator. Thanks for having me. So, we're talking about the new facility, and I'm, on board. We do need it. But I also need to look at the current state of affairs that we're in now. It's going to take a while to get us to the point where, if we do have a new correctional facility, that's going to take a while. So looking at current projects, making sure that the facility that we have for these folks is maintained and operational. I know BGS does a great job with that. We've got projects in place now, but it's also the upkeep. It's an expensive building because of that. It's an old building, and we'll just keep plugging away at that and making sure that we are providing an excellent environment for the folks that we have in our care. But that's, we do talk a lot about the future and the new building, but it's the current state of affairs. I mean, it's going to be a few years before we would get something like that online. And in the meantime, we've got to keep a good environment moving forward for the folks that are there. So that's what I would add to this, is that, we do have some projects in place. We want to continue to make sure that we're making that environment the best it can be with what we have, and working with our partners in BGS to do so. Thank you.
So Matt, as Director of Facilities, if we're talking about the women in particular, I want to back up a little bit and give you a little funny story. When I first got elected to the legislature, there's this 3-member group called the Committee on Committees that is assigned to present each new legislator to a given committee or assign them to a given committee. And they also ask you when you first come aboard, what committee would you like to be on? Well, I'm a trial attorney, so I figured judiciary was pretty good. I was on the school board at the time, so I thought education was pretty good. I had been town moderator, so I thought that government operations was pretty good. And in the wisdom of the Committee on Committees, Senator Mazza, I'm hoping you're listening, Senator Mazza and his 2 compatriots decided to put me on natural resources and institutions. I'm not to this day sure exactly why they did that, but they did. And back then, the women's facility was up in St. Albans, and a decision was made at the time to bring the women down to Chittenden County because it was determined that the services for the women were most appropriate in the Chittenden County area. Is that still the philosophy of your department today?
Yeah, I mean, it is a rich environment for that. There are services there that are accessible. Work release program, going back when I was there, back in 2009, We had a work release program for the men that were there when it was a male facility, before it became an all-female facility. That was a good program. And it ran well, and we had some successes there to integrate folks back into the community and get them, the jobs that they needed. It is a target-rich environment for those resources. And I would say that it's probably the most in the state, and it holds true today. I would agree.
Are you part of the decision-making process? If you're given option A is somewhere else and option B is back in Chittenden County, are you personally part of the process of making that decision as director of facilities?
I would say, yeah, I am part of that process. I am involved in the conversations with Chief Cormier and the commissioner, and definitely part of that. Yes.
Anybody, any questions for Matt? Matt, thank you very much for coming back to institutions. Emily Carr, General Counsel. I always have a general counsel that appears, but a lot of times they just say, no, I have nothing else to add. But by all means, if you have something you'd like to tell us, welcome to institutions.
Thank you very much. And I'll just, for the record, I'm Emily Carr. I'm the General Counsel for the Vermont Department of Corrections. And I do not have anything to add on this topic. To be a little helpful to you, Senator Benning, I'm mainly on the agenda today for some input with regard to the ADA compliance later on this afternoon.
Okay, great.
So,
I should ask you, you're not any relation to the Carr family out of Derby, are you?
I am not.
Okay. Well, that's good, because you might be related by marriage to me now if you were. Bill Soul is who I have up next, Community Corrections District Manager. Bill, I don't know if I can't see you yet on the screen. I don't know if you're out there.
I am out there. Am I on the screen now? Okay, so Bill Soul, I'm the district manager of the Hartford Probation and Parole office. And I'm also currently assigned to our central office as a project manager, and I've been involved with the women's project. I guess I really don't have anything to add. I think Matt Nault was spot on. Just I want to reemphasize that over half of the women currently incarcerated will never see the new facility. In theory, there's about 48 women there that are currently serving sentences of 18 months or less. So in theory, they should be out of jail before the new facility opens. So we can't lose sight of, we're probably 5 or 6 years away from opening a new facility. So we need to continue to plug away to improve the conditions at the Chittenden facility, but while also thinking about where does that fit in the long-term process? How do we repurpose that facility? Are we looking at building a reentry facility on a separate ground and continue utilizing that facility in some capacity? Those are all important questions that we need to really work through. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming by. I am at the end of my list of witnesses for the Department of Corrections, unless Commissioner, you or Al tell me there's somebody else that needs to say something, especially about the women's facility. We're going to shift gears a tad bit. And I have, going back to section 3, Commissioner, I believe this would be Commissioner Fitch at this point. I think you're no, I'll correct that. Forgive me, I'm reading down a very long list of names trying to figure out who's on board here. I believe the next commissioner would be Emily Hawes from the Department of Mental Health. And Emily, are you on the screen?
Actually, this is Karen Barber, General Counsel for the Department of Mental Health. I am here in her place today.
Okay, Karen, welcome back to institutions. You've been here before. Do you need to have section 3 brought up on the screen for your conversation with us this afternoon?
That is entirely up to you and the committee. I'm prepared to kind of just I had a few things I was going to go over, but I also wasn't sure exactly what the committee wanted to hear on in terms of the secure residential. So it may be helpful to get some information from you as to what you'd like me to talk about.
Well, primarily, I'm looking for an update.
Okay. So I had prepared some information just about the facility itself and who goes there. I'm happy to go through that, but if you don't need me to do that background, I don't need to. I'm not sure what's helpful.
I'm actually preferring that you do that so that we are all on the same page, as well as our YouTube listening audience.
Okay, sounds great. So again, for the record, Karen Barber, I'm General Counsel for the Department of Mental Health, which for those of you who don't normally interact with general counsels, it's basically just a fancy way of saying I'm an attorney for the commissioner and often testify on her behalf. So I was going to quickly just go over the program. So we are seeking, the Department of Mental Health is working on building a new physically secure residential facility, which would replace our current 7-bed facility, the Middlesex Therapeutic Community Residence, or MTCR, which is in Middlesex. So this is a program that targets a small number of individuals with complex clinical needs who can't be served anywhere else. So they're individuals whose clinical presentations are such that they no longer meet hospital level of care, but due to their clinical presentation and safety risk, they also can't be served in the community at the time they're ready to discharge from an inpatient unit. And these are generally folks coming from level 1 units, which are our highest acuity units across the state. Everyone placed, did you have a question? You're muted. I think you're asking me something though.
You are correct. Thank you. Just to give our audience an understanding of where things are, the facility that you're talking about in Middlesex is the same temporary facility that was built back in the Shumlin administration for this same population of individuals who are in need of services. And I know we are long past the usage of that particular facility. And I just want to make clear that the reason we're pursuing this path that you're about to speak on is that we are desperately in need of changing out what we currently have at Middlesex. With that, I'll ask you to resume and apologize for interrupting.
Oh, no, of course. Yes. So it is essentially 2 FEMA trailers put together. That is the current Middlesex facility. It was originally a temporary solution for about 5 years, but it is well past that. So it is very much due for replacement. The clinical staff make do with this space, but it is certainly not an ideal clinical space, which is why we're seeking to build a state-of-the-art facility. So everyone who goes to this facility and who will go to the new facility is involuntarily in the custody of the Commissioner of Mental Health on an order of non-hospitalization. So that means they've been in the hospital on an order of hospitalization and they've been discharged on an outpatient order, but they continue to meet the statutory standards to be a person in need of treatment. It is a special type of ONH, or order of non-hospitalization, to go to a secure facility, and basically the court must find, or the parties must stipulate, that there's no least restrictive alternative appropriate for the person's clinical needs. The department's legislative mandate is to serve people in the least restrictive setting possible. So we always try to serve people in the community when possible. But as I said, there is a small number of folks that continue to need a secure setting once they're released from the hospital. This is a facility licensed by Dale, or the Department of Aging and Independent Living, hopefully I got that right, as a therapeutic community residence. So again, it provides outpatient treatment in a secure setting. It has an average length of stay of about 10.5 months. And it has a high occupancy rate and is almost always on a wait list. So that's kind of who goes to the facility. Where it fits into our system of care in general is, again, it's designed as a step-down facility, so it's not an inpatient level of care. So it is a community-based treatment, but again, it's a secure option. The goal is for people to not remain at Middlesex or the new facility for long periods of time, but instead just to continue to help them transition, clinically stabilize, and then go back out into the community. The new facility is going to be a 16-bed state-of-the-art facility providing holistic care, focused on individuals' mental health, physical health, and if applicable, any substance use issues. It'll be trauma-informed and evidence-based care and have a strong connection to individuals' community mental health services and primary care providers. It will be staffed by 24-hour on-site nursing, as well as psychiatry, psychology, social workers, mental health specialists, mental health recovery specialists, peer professionals, and activity therapists. So where we are, so our CON, we applied for a certificate of need from the Green Mountain Care Board and were granted that certificate of need in August of 2021. So building has begun, and I'm sure BGS probably has some pictures and can update you as to more of the actually how it's going. But we did have to go back to the Green Mountain Care Board at the end of December to request a material change to the budget solely because of the increased construction costs due to COVID, which I think most construction projects at this time are having to go back to the board. So we don't anticipate any issues there as long as the legislature approves our request for additional funding, which I think BGS can talk about in terms of what we're asking you for in terms of money.
Karen, can I interrupt you once more?
Yes.
You were talking about interplay between the Green Mountain Care Board and this project. The Green Mountain Care Board was set up roughly the same time that this facility was constructed, but most of our YouTube listeners probably do not understand the dynamic. Why is it that you would have to go through the board, and what is their function here?
Sure. Well, I'll take a stab at that. So the Green Mountain Care Board, one of their tasks is to regulate, I think, new healthcare facilities. And so because we are a healthcare facility and because our budget is above a certain amount, they need to make sure there's statutory criteria to make sure new projects built in the state of Vermont meet certain standards. And so when we went in front of the Green Mountain Care Board, we had to explain to them why our project fit into their different statutory criteria in terms of, you know, healthcare requirements and why it was financially feasible and with the populations we intended to serve. So it's a whole process to go through the Green Mountain Care Board. And as I said, most healthcare projects in Vermont have to go through that, and we were no exception.
Thank you for that.
Yes. So those were what I had kind of prepared. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I'm looking at the committee members and I don't see anybody with a hand up. So first off, thanks for coming back in and giving us that explanation. My next witness listed is Shannon Thompson, Financial Director for the Department of Mental Health. Shannon, welcome to Senate Institutions. Did you have something to add to the conversation?
Good afternoon. Yes, I'm Shannon Thompson, the Financial Director for the Department of Mental Health. Unless you have some specific financial questions, I don't really have anything to add. As Karen mentioned, we are going back out to the Green Mountain Care Board with this change, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Are you the person who is officially in charge of approaching the Green Mountain Care Board again and having the financial presentation pitched to them, so to speak?
So that is a combined effort. Karen Barber is pulling together all of the materials with the help of Tabrina Karish from BGS and myself.
Okay, what exactly do you have to do in making the Green Mountain Care Board aware of and then approve what you are trying to do? I realize this is an elementary conversation, but as part of my responsibility to the audience at large, I think it's kind of important for them to understand, as well as the committee understand, exactly what the process is that you all have to go through.
Karen, would you like to take that one?
Sure, I'm happy to attempt to take a stab at it. So one of the things that there's, I believe, a threshold that triggers a material change. I believe it's 10%, but don't quote me on that. And so we had a total increase in construction costs of 3.2%. So it did trigger that material change, which means the Agreement Care Board, when we initially applied to them and gave them all the financials, and when you apply, you give them all your spreadsheets and all your financial information, and they go through it and then ask a ton of questions to make sure they understand exactly what you're going to spend the money on. So they approved a set budget. And if you go above the budget they've approved, you need to go back and get permission. And so basically what they're asking us is to resubmit our Excel spreadsheets that we submitted the first time with the changes and amounts, and then a specific explanation of why that particular line item has increased. So what we've done, we haven't filed it yet, we're just finalizing it this week, but basically what we're going to do is present a new Excel spreadsheet comparing the numbers we originally submitted with the new numbers, and then BGS has gone through line by line and explained exactly why each item has increased.
So
And
this
then
is not a rubber stamp by any stretch of the imagination. Would that be
No,
safe
it
to
is
say?
not.
And just
No,
for the
it's-
benefit of our audience, Green Mountain Care Board is responsible for keeping a lid on how virtually every health care oriented section of government is functioning by way of financial resources, especially. I appreciate that explanation. Did you have anything else you wanted to add there, Karen?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Which brings me finally to Commissioner Fitch. Welcome to Senate Institutions. And I'll bet you do have some part in this conversation before we get to everything else you needed to talk about today. So
Thank
welcome
you.
back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Jennifer Fitch, and I have the honor and the privilege of being the Commissioner of the Department of Buildings and General Services. Our main goal, as you know, Mr. Chairman, is that we provide and we support programs through our buildings. And so DMH and DOC, so the Department of Mental Health and the Department of Corrections, are our customers. And that's the way we interact with them, and we provide them with services. So with respect to the two projects that we've talked about, and I won't steal Tabrina Karish's thunder because really both of these are her projects, but I can do a little high level, and then when we're ready to pass it off, she can fill in much more detail. With respect to women's reentry and women's correctional, I have to say that I completely understand where you're coming from, Mr. Chairman, and I identify with the need and the urgency to advance that project. I too have been sitting here since 2017, and it has taken us this long to get to where we are today. What I will say is that by hiring HOK, who was the consultant we hired last year, to do an initial very high level planning study, if you will, to help create a pathway and a roadway forward, I think we've made some significant progress with HOK through their study, and we now are at a point where we can move forward. And last year, if you remember, Mr. Chairman, the administration requested and the legislature approved money for both women's reentry and women's correctional for a programming and planning study. And Tabrina can provide some more detail on where we are there. But here's what I would say. I came to your committee 2 weeks ago. I provided this committee with an overview of the project development process. And like all things, we have to go through that process in order to make sure that the end product, right, which is a women's reentry and a women's correctional facility, meets the needs of the population it serves. And if we don't do our due diligence and we don't manage the project accordingly, we're either going to have a facility that does not function the way that it was intended, or does not have the ability to basically provide for these incarcerated women during the time that they're in that facility. And we don't want to do that, right? We want to make sure that these facilities function the way that they're intended. And so we do need to be thoughtful and diligent in our work. The other thing that creates a great complexity here is that it's not just really one correctional facility that we're talking about, right? It's a whole system of correctional facilities, and there are linkages between them. So we don't want to be short-sighted, right? We want to make sure that we are citing these facilities appropriately. And that means we have to not only look at women's correctional and women's reentry, but we actually have to look at those two facilities in our overall system of care for incarcerated individuals. And what I mean by that, Mr. Chairman, specifically is Do we do a reentry and a women's correctional on the same site? Do we have them on different sites? Do we put them on a campus and potentially put them in a place like St. Albans where they're also with the male, obviously separated, but on the same campus as the male population as well? There's many different factors that we want to look at to make sure that our siting for the facility, along with the program requirements, again, suit the needs of the population that we're serving. And so we are about to embark on the planning and programming study. Sabrina can give you an update on that. And the great thing is that we are hoping before we meet with you next year in this committee, that we have that planning and programming study complete, and then we can officially move into the design phase. So that is good news, I believe, and music hopefully to everybody's ears. And I will say that we are working really, really well with the Department of Corrections, and I'm really excited to see this initiative advance. And again, we are as eager as you are to make this happen. On the sorry, would you like me to stop there?
Yeah, I was actually going to jump in there and say that I can appreciate the hurdles, if you will, about dealing with a committee like ours, which is talking about strictly the brick and mortar, and how that is dovetailed with policy committees who are making decisions about the demographics of the women who may be in these facilities. And those things are constantly changing. So I appreciate and am cognizant of the fact that it is one thing to prepare for brick and mortar construction, but another altogether to figure out what's going to be inside that brick and mortar, which is technically not part of our committee. And I do serve on another one of those committees that is constantly making changes to, for instance, people that are supposed to be or not supposed to be incarcerated. And it is all part and parcel of the same game. So for our listening audience, know that what you might have heard from me as being exasperation at getting something accomplished also has to be faced by all the folks who are testifying today with respect to the policy decisions that are being made at the same time. So I may be frustrated from an institutional standpoint, but there are other things that are going on that you folks, I do know and understand why you're also frustrated by that, and they become obstacles. My job, I guess, here today is just to make sure we keep the pressure on and everybody is moving in the same direction.
And
sorry to interrupt.
And we appreciate the pressure, Mr. Chairman, and that was well said, right? The policy does really drive eventually what the building becomes, right? And how it functions and what kinds of services it provides. So that was very well said, Mr. Chairman, and the policy definitely has a big impact on the building. I will also say that I had the opportunity, as Al Cormier said earlier, to go with DOC this summer and to go and see the main reentry facility. And if folks on this committee have not had the opportunity to go see that facility, I very much recommend that you do so. It is lighter and brighter. The incarcerated individuals are much more hopeful, much more engaged, and they definitely do a lot to make sure or ensure that those women, once they integrate back into society, are successful in doing so. And so I was very impressed with the building, with the programming for the incarcerated individuals, with the officers and the way they interacted with the incarcerated individuals. And also, as I mentioned before, location does seem to be pretty critical. So because of the siting of that facility, they have relatively good access to downtown locations where they can meet with family or they can work during their time in the reentry facility. And so siting will be critical, in my opinion, for this facility as well. Can I give a little thumbnail? Is it okay to shift to the residential recovery facility?
Yes, please.
Okay. So thank you. So I also won't steal Sabrina's thunder, and she will provide more detail here, but she's our project manager that does it all here at BGS. We're very happy to have her. But with respect to that mental health care facility, here's the great news, because I don't get to say this very often. So I'm happy that I get to say it to you, your committee, and all your viewers out there, Mr. Chairman, and that is the project is on schedule. Yay! So that's really good news. And we're hoping that by the end of December, the facility is completed with construction. And so that's great news. And Sabrina's doing a fantastic job overseeing that project. And again, walls are starting to go up. So if you haven't had a chance to see the foundation and you haven't had a chance to see the site, I recommend another drive-by. It's really impressive to see how fast it's coming together. With respect to cost, I will keep it high level and let you know that, as Senator Mazza has said on several prior testimonies, we are seeing significant price increases in construction. And that really has to do with a few different factors going on. One is inflation. We're all experiencing inflation. One is workforce shortages in the trades. And the governor, as we've heard in his budget address, is very supportive of getting more people into the trades. And we are too here at BGS. And the third piece is supply chain irregularities, which means that either prices are increased or we can't get the products that we're trying to order. They're delayed. And obviously that can often cost us more and cause project delays. And so that being said, we experienced a 20% increase on average over the summer on all the projects we were delivering. And this fall, we were up around 40% on some of our projects. I believe that has started to come down a little bit currently, but again, we expect to see continued fluctuations over time with the current market. So those are sort of my high level updates on those two projects. But again, Sabrina can provide more detailed information.
I appreciate that. I had life safety security needs and enhancements in my schedule. I don't know if any of you had wanted to talk about that particular subject before we turn it over to Sabrina, but maybe you could help there.
So, Mr. Chairman, I believe, but I will check with my counterparts here. Does that have to do with, and maybe Emily will flash on the screen, is that the Department of Justice ADA topic?
I'm going to assume it is related, since it's real close to that in my schedule. I did have DOC Correctional Facilities ADA compliance. They must be related in some form.
So this is I have the agenda, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. So this is statewide correctional facility, life safety, security needs, and enhancements. So that would be both DOC, as well as I saw Joe flash on the screen. And so Joe Asia from our team can likely speak to that one as well.
Okay. Joe, I have you. Actually, you're ahead of Sabrina. So if this is an opportune time for you to kick in, feel free.
Thank you, Senator. For the record, Joe Aja. I am the Director of Design and Construction for Buildings and General Services. So this money here goes to corrections for their want and needs for any of the items under the life safety and security needs, and BGS executes the work getting done. So that can be adding, anything from, we had an issue with ligature points on doors. And so we are putting in doors now that you can't tie anything off to and hang yourself from, the likes of that. It's additional razor ribbon. Potentially, they need a camera in a certain location that that's outside of security doing it for them or something like that. So that's sort of what these things are all about.
So I probably should have prefaced those remarks by saying we're moving from the G-rated discussion into the more PG-rated discussion. When we talk about life safety, security, and enhancements, we're talking about a pretty serious subject that has to be covered, and we do need to talk about. Al, I see you're back on the screen. I don't know whether you wanted to have any contribution to that conversation.
Well, I think Joe did a good job covering what it really entails, but our team meets with the BGS team on a monthly basis. We review current projects. The superintendents are constantly feeding information to Matt and Alt around needs inside the facility, projects, maintenance that needs to happen if we have a broken bunk or a situation like that where something needs to be corrected. But we're working on a door project right now to replace solid doors with doors that we can see through as a means of preventing somebody from locking themselves and potentially engaging in an active self-harm. So those are the things that we need to look at, and those are the projects that the life safety funding really takes care of.
And that's a regular monthly meeting between you and BGS?
Yes.
I'm getting a flash notice in the chat room that ligature is probably not a term that most people understand. And one of you wants to explain it. I know what it is, but our YouTube audience may not. What is the concern on behalf of DOC, and how does BGS react to that concern?
So a ligature can be any piece of material, clothing, rope, string, that is used to, more often than not in these situations, as a means of self-harm on an individual. So somebody that may be attempting to hang oneself. So when we say a ligature-proof coat hook or whatever it may be, it's something where we can't tie anything around it. We want to make sure that there's no way to tie a knot around a coat hook or tie a knot around a bunk. Our bunks in our restricted housing units are all plastic. They're a solid piece of hard, dense plastic that there really is no corner or tie-off point that can be used. I know when we recently replaced some windows in the St. Johnsbury facility, we needed to make sure those were a ligature-proof window where nothing could be attached or tied to it. So everything we're looking at is in regards to protecting the population and enhancing the safety of our buildings.
Okay, thanks. Anything else you gentlemen want to add to that conversation?
I have nothing.
No.
Okay, Sabrina, I'm hoping you're still with us. I don't see you back on my screen.
I am here. I am Sabrina Karish. I am a project manager for Buildings and General Services. And is there a preference to which project I speak about first?
No preference, but the floor is yours. And I'm not sure that I've ever seen you in committee before.
I have been here many times.
Could be just because you're appearing
I am
dark
very
and
dark
low
right
on
now.
my
I
screen. That
apologize.
might be what it is. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. So I will go with the Dmh Recovery Residence first. And so as Jennifer mentioned, we are over budget. Last year we were at 16.1 million. We are at 19.1 million this year, which is an 18.6% increase. Jennifer's already talked about why that is under the 20% increase that we've seen across the board. So we are doing better than some projects. Our schedule, we broke ground October 15th. We are scheduled to be completed by December of this year. And we expect occupancy in the first quarter of 2023. There was some language in the capital bill last year that I wanted to address. The language called for a yard over 10,000 square feet. We are over 11,600 square feet for our yard. And the language also called for a set of doors to separate an 8-bed wing from the core and the other wing of the facility, which we do have. And the location of those doors, there's a lot of code requirements that go into that, but it's also located in the location that we felt gave us the best flexibility for a variety of situations. And I did have a slideshow and some construction pictures, which I don't know if was ever transferred to you, but like I said, we are under construction. We are starting to stand up exterior walls. So we are on schedule and we are doing well.
Alex, do we happen to have those?
Analyzing them and identifying how they're going to be applied.
I'm sorry, what do you need?
You have a slideshow that was presented on this particular topic. Sabrina, can you? I don't know whether or not.
I can share a screen, sure.
Okay.
Sabrina, I've just given you screen sharing privileges.
And that's the outcome of your business process.
I should have done this first, but and so this year we are requesting an additional 3 million in funding to cover that difference. timeline, which I already went over. So last in the middle of the session last year, we started construction documents. This was the final plan. So here's the set of fire doors right here, which separates this 8-bed wing. We also have a separation in the yard to accommodate for those scenarios that would require separation.
Tell us again, please, where this is.
This is actually on the where the Woodside facility was previously located. So we have demolished the Woodside facility. The gymnasium remained, which you see up here in the upper quarter. And the secure yard is between the facility, and this is the new facility here. So this is in Essex.
And how many folks will be accommodated here?
16 beds.
Okay.
And so here's just some look at construction. This is from beginning of January. And you can see, we are doing winter conditions for this job, which was the only scope change from our previous budgets. And that was just due to the delay in the project to get the certificate of need. More winter conditions. What you see here is a concrete pump truck pumping concrete into the foundation wall. And this was last Monday, where they're beginning to sand the exterior walls that are being fabricated in the contractor's shop offsite. And so that is all I have on that facility.
It's good to see construction moving ahead. I don't know if you had something else you were planning to present this afternoon.
I have more information on the DOC study if you would like more information.
Well, if you can summarize, that would be good.
Sure. Let me just switch my notes here. And so, as was discussed previously, we did a feasibility study that was presented last year. That study was 2 parts. The first part was really an analysis of our existing facilities. And the second part of the study was a master planning effort to best meet the short and long-term needs of the correction system. So out of that, part 2 of that study, there was 5 options presented. Option C was determined to be the best option. So the next step basically is to take that option C and further develop it into a 10-year phase development plan. So as part of that option, we would not just be looking at the women's correctional facilities, but also the men's, and taking in option C, there was basically a recommendation to consolidate a site in the Northwest, which would include Chittenden County, into basically 4 different facilities: a men's reentry, women's reentry, men's correctional facility, and women's correctional facility, as well as close some of our lesser used facilities in the southern part of the state, and also expand at Springfield. And so before we do the women's correctional reentry facility, we basically need to come up with a master plan and a development plan for the rest of the state. We can't do one without the other. So the next round of RFPs is split up into 3 segments. The first is the phase 10-year development plan. The second would be programming and conceptual design for the women's reentry and correctional facility. Then the third part would be a site analysis, looking for a site for the women's correctional reentry facility, either combined or separate, or whatever plan comes out of the 10-year phase development plan. And so this year we are requesting in this budget is $1 million. And that would actually get us through the next step, which would be schematic design for a women's correctional reentry facility.
Okay. Committee, any questions? Don't see any. Sabrina, thank you very much for coming along, and I apologize for not recognizing you, but in fairness, you are backlit at the moment, so I'm having a hard time seeing your face. Anyhow, Commissioner, I had Jeremy Stevens and Eric Philcorn still on my witness list. Eric usually provides us color commentary with humor. I don't know whether Jeremy had anything he wanted to kick in at this point either.
His brand is respect.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee. Thank you again for having us. I don't have anything to add, so I am just going to be bench candy this afternoon.
Good term. With that, we need to shift gears a little bit, but I want to thank all of you for coming and giving us an explanation and an update this afternoon. I suspect as the House counterparts on institutions get through their work with the capital bill, there may be changes to what the original ask was, and if there are problems with that, I suspect you'll be reaching out to beg us to try to correct it. I don't know how else to explain that without angering somebody, but I'm confident we'll see you again. Let's put it that way. We are a little bit behind schedule, but I would like to have, Commissioner, if you could finish off your presentation that we were discussing the other day when we had to cut you off. We're continuing the proposed budget adjustments for the BGS capital projects. And honestly, I do not remember where we left off with you. We were in section 2, as I recall, of the capital bill. And I don't know whether you had a specific place you wanted to start, Commissioner?
I believe, but hopefully the committee will keep me honest, that the last project I remember talking about, Mr. Chairman, was Rutland Asa Bloomer. So I believe we left off at Springfield door control.
That sounds correct, actually. And Alex, I don't know if you can bring that section up onto the screen, or Commissioner, whether you've got that on your screen and we can screen share, but it probably would behoove us to have that up on the screen somehow.
I have given you screen sharing permission, Commissioner.
So I'm terrible when it comes to anything IT related. So I am not a good person to be able to navigate. That being said, Eric Philcorn is here, and he's an ace at this kind of stuff. So if Eric can pull the spreadsheet up, then we should be rocking and rolling.
Oh, okay. Needing just a moment to.
We put him on the spot though. We weren't quite ready, but he'll do a great job.
That's all right. We like to watch him break out in a cold sweat.
Did you see my face that moment where I was thinking, what do they want from me? Because I might have been updating the OPC website at the same time. Forms and publications.
So as you can, Mr. Chairman, I'll do a little intro to always help your audience, because I know that we want to make sure your audience knows where we are and what we're doing. So we are focused on what's called Section 2 today. Section 2 is the section of the capital bill that's specifically the BGS section of the capital bill. And a lot of times what I like to say about Section 2 is that it's often like major maintenance, which is deferred maintenance, and we have a line for major maintenance. But what I like to call them is that this is deferred maintenance gone rogue, meaning primarily these are large building system replacements that don't fit within the major maintenance line item due to the scale, their larger projects, and the cost.
I'll just pause to note that Eric has always got some humorous something to throw up on the screen. That's a great line.
Probably Eric doesn't realize that his background, Mr. Chairman, is displaying at the moment.
I see.
Perhaps not.
I thought he meant sketchy lurkers like this committee.
Oh, no, that's actually, that's another department. I'll tell you what, I will move that there. That's what we like. Actually, sketchy lurkers refers to me because during the height of COVID, I was deployed to the health department. And even after I left the health department, I kept showing up on random conference calls because I still was curious. And they started to call me a lurker. And then they clawed me back. So Section 2, it's not a terribly exciting graphic, but
You could increase that a little bit more. We can at least follow down on the column that describes each category.
Here we go. Is that reading?
That's better.
It is, but
Really, we need,
you're
We need
at,
the figure.
I think you're on reallocations potentially, Eric, and not
thank
section
you.
2.
Imagine that.
You're getting there.
You're getting there.
Yeah,
Section
it's a
10.
journey. It's a
It is a
journey. This is the budget process. This is the process of me scrolling. And there we finally come to
We've gotten to
section 2 with all the yellow.
Yay.
Can Senator McCormick see yellow?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Excuse me.
That's
Yes, I
the-
can.
That's the only bonus color here, so. There.
Thank you, Eric. I always appreciate your assistance. So the first project we'll pick up on is Springfield Southern State Correctional Facility. So this is one of our correctional facilities. And we have a door control project. And really what that means is we are going through each of our correctional facilities one by one and updating the door control systems. At the time when these facilities were built, over time with all of the use of these facilities, certain components of buildings start to break down, and that includes our doors. And so we've been having a lot of challenges maintaining the doors that we have. In addition, we want them to be tied to basically the computer system within the correctional facility so that they can easily be locked and unlocked from a centralized location within the facility. And so this is what that project does. We just completed Newport about a year and a half ago or so, and Springfield is the next location. And so you'll see that last year we requested last year the legislature approved $2,750,000 in FY22 and nothing for FY23. This year, we're asking for an additional $750,000 to be able to complete that project in FY23. In addition to that, we're asking for it to be funded through the capital bill because this is all construction funding. So, Mr. Chairman, for the folks that are watching, this year, the administration is proposing to do two things. One, to utilize the capital bill for construction, the actual bricks and mortar, the building. And then we're asking for something new called the cash fund, which would be using general fund dollars to fund both planning and design. And the reason why we want to do that is by using this method over time, we will bond for less dollars, which will save Vermont taxpayers significant amounts of money over time. And hopefully, if she has not come in yet, Secretary Klauser and Mike Middleman will be invited to come in and talk more specifically about the cash fund and the value that it brings to Vermonters over time. In terms of why we're asking for an additional $750,000, it's essentially the same theme that you have been hearing. It has to do with an increase in time and materials. That said, if Jeremy is still on the line, this is his project. And so, Jeremy, did you want to give a little thumbnail over and above what I said, if you're still here?
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Mr. Chair, if I may, I just add that we're looking to begin construction here very soon. Construction manager is wrapping up their final estimate piece, which is called the guaranteed maximum price. And if all goes well, we'll be ready to start construction in July. And we're expecting a completion in August of the following year.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Would you like me to move on, Mr. Chairman?
Please.
The next line item is Waterbury State Office Complex. So I'm sure your viewers remember that Hurricane Irene came through in 2012, and the Waterbury State Office Complex was one of those places that was greatly impacted by flooding. And we worked together, both the administration and the legislature, to rebuild the Waterbury State Office Complex. But one of the things that was not addressed at the time of that project was the historic core roofs. So the roofs are primarily slate, along with, this is where Joe can chime in. I'm trying to remember what the gutters are. So there's slate and copper, I believe. I got there. I got to the copper eventually. And so this is a project much like door control, where what we would like to do is we would like to replace the roofs one at a time on these historic buildings. And so we will continue to request funding over time for this project. But last year, you approved $1 million in FY22 and 3.2 million in FY23. We are asking for the same amount of money this year, so no change in that. And we are asking that to be funded by the capital bill, because FY22 money will be used for design and FY23 money will be used for construction. Because
Okay.
these are historic buildings, we have to replace it in kind. There may be some exceptions. We're working with historic preservation, and there may be some areas that are less visible to the public where we might be able to use what looks like slate, but is not actually slate.
Okay.
White River Junction, this is one that's probably near and dear to your heart, Mr. Chairman. So White River Junction Courthouse renovation. So this is a building that has been in BGS's portfolio for some amount of time. There was an initial planning effort several years ago before I became the deputy. So that would have been 2017. And we looked at this building specifically because it's leaky. We get water through the walls and the windows. And so we had started a project to address those concerns in the building. However, through our planning process and most recently, we have recognized that our HVAC system, which is heating, venting, and air conditioning, basically that system is dying and needs to be replaced. So in addition to dealing with the leaky walls and windows, we will also be dealing with replacing the existing HVAC system with a new one. In addition to that, if you've ever been in the building, the front entryway is very narrow. And when people walk into the courthouse, the judiciary has an officer at the door who basically scans people as they come in the door and allows access into the building. And so right now that space is really confined and tight and awkward. So it's hard for that officer to have the space they need to do that work. So this will also incorporate the front entryway and making it much more functional to be able to again, provide access to people coming into the courthouse.
This particular courthouse is one of the more recent, as I recall it, in our courthouse portfolio. I don't know if you know exactly when it was built, but at least as I think about the courthouses around the state, this one doesn't seem to be that old to me, or maybe I'm just getting older. Do we have
Mr.
any
Chairman?
recourse? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I was at the ribbon, not the ribbon cutting, the opening of the courthouse as a state senator. So it's within my career. It's not that old a building.
I'm just trying to figure out, do we have any recourse against the contractors who put that together, that we're having a leaky building at this point in time?
So Joe can provide more detail on the specific age of the building and whether or not that building existed or whether we built it, because then that changes a few things. But I can tell you that typically speaking, building systems last about 20 to 40 years. And every 20 to 40 years, they need to be replaced. And that includes things like what we're talking about, windows and walls, as well as HVAC units. Joe, do you want to speak more specifically to the age of the building and when we acquired it?
We did construct the building. I'm trying to look up exactly what year that was. And right now, being put on the spot, I can't find it. Well, maybe I did. 1987 is when it was constructed.
Okay, well, then I misspoke. I entered the Senate in 1989. I was at some kind of ceremony opening.
You probably went to the ribbon cutting and the grand opening.
Yeah.
Because the drawings were dated 1987, so we started. That's
when you started. Yeah.
Started construction. Yeah.
So it's not that old a building.
It is not. However, the air handling system has to be rebuilt. I mean, it met its standards in its day, but there are issues that we have today as we're running in, as standards change. It was not a complete replicate of the Brattleboro court, Windham County, where we did this, I want to say in 2010, had gone through and done a complete overhaul of the HVAC system. In this building, though, when there is a driving rain, we do have leaks coming through the brick. We have taken off some of the brick in and around the windows to try and find out why it is leaking through. We have found some of the flashing, and that is in this case, on this building, the flashing is a rubberized membrane that runs through the brick, but connects into the interstice, the intermediate space in between the building shell and the brick facade. That has slipped over time, and we believe that that is part of the problem. However, as I said, in a driving rain, it still comes through and wicks its way through into the building, and we do not know why. So we have to take off more of the exterior structure to find out what is causing this issue. And then also with the windows, it appears that it likes to leak around the windows the most, and that is where you have the most amount of flashing for that interruption. So it is not covered under warranty. A warranty on that would be 1 year typically. And so that warranty has long expired.
Well, that's too bad. Yep.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I would point out though that while 45 seems young, and I'm close to that age, and I like to consider myself to be young, we are over those 20 and 40-year marks with a building. And like I said, it's those 20 and 40-year cycles where we have to be replacing building systems and components. So that being said, last year you approved $1.5 million for FY23. Our request remains the same for FY23, and we were asking for capital bill dollars because, like I said, we had already done quite a bit of planning, programming, and design to begin with. So we just have to go back to what we already had, revise it, make sure it's still current, and then we'll be able to start construction.
Okay.
Brattleboro, another courthouse, Mr. Chairman. Brattleboro Courthouse re-roof. So last year, we have a courthouse down in Brattleboro, and the roof has been leaking for some time. I've actually visited that building a few times and walked it with our maintenance mechanics. They do their very best when the building leaks and the roof leaks to patch it, right? We work with contractors to come in to patch it. But at this point, we've patched it so many times that it's ready to actually replace the roof. That's far more cost effective. And so you appropriated last year $100,000 for FY23. We're asking for the same this year, so no change in that. But we are asking for it to come from the cash fund instead of the capital bill, because this would be for planning and design.
Okay.
The next line item, and Eric, you'll have to help me because I don't have my revised one, and I used to have this off the top of my head, but I have now forgotten. Line item 16, can you remind me what that one is again, Eric?
Oh, it's
yes,
it's 32 Cherry Street Garage.
Ah, another parking garage. So all of our projects are courthouses and parking garages, everybody. So this next one is, excuse me,
Senator Maz just said something.
I'm excited.
Aren't you?
He loves parking garages.
I love parking garages. Yeah, I call Ireland, have them fill of cement, fill it up. That's what I do.
The challenge with parking garages in the state of Vermont is that they're made with concrete and steel, right? And in the wintertime, what we do is we take all of that salt and snow and we park our cars. All that salt and snow goes onto the concrete slabs, eventually makes its way through the concrete, hits the reinforcing, and then we start having cracking in our concrete. So that's exactly what's going on here, Mr. Chairman. And so last year you had appropriated $865,000 for FY23. We are asking for the same amount this year, so no change, but we are asking for a split between the cash fund and the capital bill, $80,000 for the cash fund and $785,000 for the capital fund, capital bill. And that's because the $80,000 will be used for planning and design, and the $785,000 will be used for construction.
How much for planning and design?
$80,000, Senator Mazza, we're predicting for planning and design.
That's called a pregnant pause.
Yeah, that's really excites me. Yeah.
I know, it's no fun. I had to replace my forced hot air heater last year, which is not exciting. But I had to do it, otherwise it was going to die and I wouldn't have heat, and that would be an even larger problem. So I
That would have been
understand.
exciting.
It would have been frustrating at the same time as well. And far more expensive, which is the same thing. If we don't address the current deterioration within these garages, decay accelerates over time, and then they're even more expensive to fix. The next one is a project high on my list personally as the BGS commissioner. My goal, as I said during my last testimony, is to utilize all state-owned office space. So when I have state-owned office space just sitting there vacant, it really bothers me because we don't have a tenant in the space, and therefore everybody's paying a little bit more in their fee for space, which is what we use to pay for basically maintaining our state-owned buildings. So this is 111 State Street. This is the Supreme Court in Montpelier. If you've never seen it before, it's an absolutely beautiful building. And for the folks in this committee, I believe you remember that several years ago, we had a proposal. It went all the way to renovate this space along with the connector, which links both the building that we call 109, but the administration is in that building, and then the Supreme Court, which is 111, and then there's a connector in between them. That cost estimate went all the way up to $45 million, and the governor and BGS agreed that it was too expensive and we had to go back, and we really had to look at the needs versus the wants. And that's exactly what we're doing here and proposing to do. So right now we have what we call a stack area. It's where libraries used to be in the adjacent to the Supreme Court. And it's just sitting there and it's vacant. The interesting thing about the stack area is it's actually structural to that room, meaning we can't just simply take out the book stacks and put in a second floor. We actually have to make sure we're doing this in a structurally sound way as we do the construction. So this project is to look at both putting 2 floors in where that stack area is. There's also a teeny little elevator, just like the Newport Courthouse, that is way too small, does not meet ADA requirements. We are proposing to upgrade that elevator. In addition to that, we also want to look at the HVAC, heating, venting, and air conditioning again, one of the common themes, and make sure that that system is sufficient for the space. With this vacant space, Mr. Chairman, what we would really like to do, which was the original intent under the old project, is to bring the judiciary all together. So right now, the administrative staff for the judiciary is in lease space across the road. What we'd really like to do is fit up this area for judiciary and bring the administration, their administrative staff over, which again will allow for those efficiencies and synergies by bringing all of their staff together under one roof. And so we're really excited about it. Last year, you had appropriated $158,000 for FY23. We're asking for the same amount this year, no change, but we are asking for that to come for the cash fund because we're going to start in planning and programming. And any money left over from that, obviously, will move into the design phase.
Okay.
The next project is another one that's near and dear to my heart, only because it's a big risk. And that is 120 State Street. For your viewers out there, this is where DMV is located in Montpelier. It is a building that has steam lines that run through it that were basically installed many, many years ago. The steam lines are leaking and at any point could blow. And if those steam lines blow, I'm going to have an emergency evacuation of the building, and it's going to be very expensive for me to repair it because anything under an emergency is more expensive than when it's planned, right? So this project, we are going to be vacating 2 floors at a time, and we're going to go through all of our walls and remove the steam line. And Joe can give a little bit more information on, Joe, what are we proposing to put in instead?
This will be forced hot water, similar to what we did in 2002 to 2008 at 133 State Street. So right now in that building, you have steam radiation on 2 of the floors, maybe 2.5 of the floors. DMV has put in air conditioning that takes up a lot of space inside the building and relatively inefficient these days. And the rest of the building, it's a 5-story building, has window units sticking out to provide the air conditioning. So this will be, after we move the steam heat, put in radiation on the exterior wall, forced hot water, and also put in a complete cooling system for all 5 floors. And what that'll do is it'll also provide ventilation, because even though they have air conditioning in certain areas, whether it's a window unit or it is the DMV stuff, they are not getting any fresh air coming in. So that will mean you've taken out the existing ceilings and putting in all new ductwork and new ceilings.
That'll do a lot to improve the time that it takes you to get your license renewed, right?
You can do a lot online, Mr. Chairman, now.
That's right. We don't need to have you there, Joe.
Okay. What
So
do? I get somebody in the Newport facility to get all my information down and get it properly plugged in for data purposes? Is that the idea?
Now you get it complicated.
All right. Sorry.
That's okay. So last year you had appropriated $525,000 for FY23. There's no change, but we are requesting this come from the cash fund because again, this is going to be for planning and design. It is worth noting though, that when we move out 2 floors of people, we're going to need some swing space, and swing space is hard to find. So there will be a cost for swing space associated with this project. The next line item is one near and dear to all the legislature's hearts, I believe. This is the State House heating, venting, and air conditioning renovation project. We have a number of air handling units on the roof. They were installed over 20 years ago or more. There's no humidification control. So if folks remember a couple of years ago, we got a lot of mold in the summertime. And it cost us about $500,000 to remediate that mold. And so we definitely want to make sure that with the new system, we can get the moisture out of the air when we're using it for air conditioning in the summertime. In addition to that, we also looked at ventilation, and based on the number of people that occupy various rooms within the State House, we need to increase the ventilation to basically make sure we have enough per person. So all of those elements are coming together under this project. Last year we had requested, or you had approved, $2,535,000 for FY23. We have increased that amount to $6.8 million because we finished the planning, programming, and we've made it through schematic design. So we know much more today than we knew when we put this estimate together. This was that story I told you about how estimates change over time based on gathering those project requirements and learning more about the project over time. I know that Joe testified to this earlier today, and I'm guessing you're going to have him back in for this project specifically. But Joe, do you want to add anything to my high-level overview?
And ruin the highlights when we get called back in? Not really. I think what we're up to is to present to you what options we have, because as we found out, this is going to be a $15.1 million project. We have some alternatives that if we want to reduce the cost, we can present those, and also how we're going to phase this project over the next several years. So we will have that for you when you invite us back.
Okay.
It's worth noting that the only time that we can work on the State House is a very narrow window of time. We cannot work on the system while you're there between January and May traditionally, and the Sergeant at Arms, Janet Miller, has to prepare the State House as well. So usually around December 1st, we have to make sure that we're done doing any work with inside the State House so she can prepare it for the upcoming legislative session. So that means that unfortunately, we will have to phase this project over multiple years to get all of the work done and work within that time frame. I will say, however, that we understand how important this project is, and we're doing everything we can do to accelerate it. To that end, the design and construction team has gone out for a construction manager. So this will be a construction manager project delivery. I believe that RFP is either on the street or will be on it shortly. And their job will be to work with the design team. So again, we can successfully phase this project over time. This upcoming summer, the goal is to install the summertime boiler, which is how we're going to heat up that air after we cool it down and get all the moisture out, as well as order some of your air handler units for construction the following season. Because of all of the delays in ordering systems and getting them delivered, we want to order them in advance so that by the time we come around to May again the following year, we're ready to hit the ground running because we have all the equipment we need. So that's what will be happening and occurring next summer.
Senator Mazza.
What happens when the members that want a $20 million, $25 million expansion, what do you do with that air system then?
So as you know, Senator Mazza, the administration does not support the State House expansion. And we made sure that the current scope and what we are delivering is done independently of that project at this time.
Yeah, because it'll disappoint the chair. He wants his name on that building. And so it'll be hard to put the air handling system in with a new addition. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll settle my name on the new bathroom facilities. Sorry.
So another favorite of ours, and I just want folks to know, this is the Rutland Multimodal Parking Garage, which BGS was gifted, I believe, for $1. I'm not sure if we gave $1 or if someone paid us $1, but unfortunately, this is now underneath our portfolio of buildings. And so again, it's another garage that is in need of repair because it's deteriorating as they do. So last year you had appropriated $600,000 for FY23. We are again asking for the same amount, no change. But in this case, we're asking for it to come from the cash fund because we'll be using that money for planning and design.
So I have to ask, what does multimodal mean?
Multimodal means, well, it means more than one mode technically. So things like cars and biking and things like that. But there's also a transit center on the lowest level of the parking garage as well. So folks can get on the bus from there.
Okay. Thank you.
The next project is the statewide 3-acre parcel stormwater planning, design, and implementation. So recently, there was a new rule that was made that took it down from, in terms of stormwater, from 10 acres to 3 acres. And we looked through our portfolio of grounds, essentially around the state, and we have identified a number of our grounds that do not meet the 3-acre rule. And so that means we need to put in more stormwater drainage. One example of that is right here in Montpelier. And for the folks that have been in Montpelier for years, you know that we have a flashy river out here that is prone to flood, especially when we get ice jams. And so unfortunately, that means oftentimes, right, the water spills over and sometimes we have flooding in our basements. So that's a situation that we need to address. We have a lot of pavement in Montpelier. We have a lot of parking lots. And interestingly enough, the lawn is also considered impervious because it doesn't drain water. And so this is a project, this will probably be the most significant stormwater project we have of all, to figure out how to convey all that water across the street, filter it obviously, and then have it go out to the river. So this money is being used. We had requested you had appropriated $600,000 last year in FY23 to basically begin that planning and design process. In this case, we are asking, and the administration is proposing, an ARPA swap for this project. So we're still asking for it to be funded, but out of a different funding source. And the last project is statewide correctionals door control system replacements. So this will be the third facility, I believe, but Joe, keep me honest, that this is for St. Johnsbury, if I remember correctly.
That is correct. St. Johnsbury is next on our list.
And so we will be using this funding to start the planning process. Last year, you had appropriated $670,000. We're asking for the same amount this year, no change, but we're asking for it to come from the cash fund because it will be used for planning and design.
Andy, any questions?
670,000 for planning and design?
That is correct, Senator Mazza. Joe, can you speak to the price of that?
As you look up above, you see our final ask for the Springfield State Correctional Facility. But prior to that, we had additional funds. And you're typically at 10% of your construction cost for design fees. But what you do run into in a correctional facility, it's a lot harder of a design and more incorporated because of the differences of a correctional facility that you'd have in a normal office building. So you are looking at is you got to chase down exactly how to get a wire from a door out in the living units, especially if it doesn't have one, but even if it is existing, because wire sizes have changed, all the way back to the master control room. You have to do that for all door locks, all the cameras, all the audio system. And there's emergency buttons. There's also means of shutting off water in case of an emergency or people trying to flood their cells and the likes of that. So it really takes a lot of work that comes into play of trying how to get all those cameras, door locks in the location they are, because most of these facilities are all concrete. So you're not just dropping, snaking something down inside of a wall to run a wire. It's really about how the best location for it and keeping it out of the inmates' hands.
So what's the project at the 670,000 would design a project that costs what?
We're going to be looking at, based on Springfield, probably 2 million, maybe.
That's a pretty high percentage, isn't it? A $2 million project and almost shy of $1 million for the design.
It is, but it does take that much to go through all those buildings. We have to, the design team goes up and has to investigate how to get all the wiring that is required back to certain locations. So they do spend weeks on the job site.
You ever thought of doing that yourself and you could replace the, you could make more money than you're making now? No?
My commissioner has told me I cannot leave. Otherwise, I would investigate other opportunities.
I'd consider that position pretty quick. Wow.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Thanks. May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Okay, and you may want to wait until at the end of the afternoon to answer this, because what we're hearing from witnesses are very exact, diligent, line by line accountings of specific expenditures. My question is broader than that, which is what is the process that the administration uses to determine that a particular price makes sense? And I just want to give, because by analogy, years ago, maybe it's 20 years ago now, there's big stink because they found out that the Pentagon was buying $500 toilets and $1,000 monkey wrenches. And people knew that a toilet shouldn't cost that much. The average person knew that a monkey wrench shouldn't cost, but the average citizen had no way of knowing what a nuclear submarine ought to cost. Similarly here, I mean, I'm here, this committee is here as representatives of the taxpayers. The whole point of the administration testifying on the budget to this committee is that it's our job in behalf of the people whose money we're spending to validate that this is as it ought to be. And I've got to be honest, I really don't know. I'm pretty much taking your word for it. And it's not to disparage you. I do trust you. I do take your word. The problem being that constitutionally, the whole idea is that I'm not supposed to do that. I'm supposed to make my own independent judgment. If nothing else, if I'm going to have to rely on your judgment, I'd like to know what is the process by which you decide that $3,674,000 is an appropriate price for architectural costs. And I'm not just reading one of the lines. How do you know that that's what you ought to be spending? Because you're telling us it's right and we're taking your word for it.
So I always appreciate when people keep me on my toes and hold me accountable. So I appreciate those questions, right? That's what you should be doing. And we're accountable to you as the legislature, to the administration, to the governor, and to all Vermont taxpayers. And so I appreciate that. And if I was a taxpayer, I'd be asking the same question. So one of the things that I want to start out with is that, this governor has been very clear with BGS that he wants to make sure that we are only focusing on needs and not wants. And that's one of the reasons why the administration is opposed to the State House expansion, because they feel that that is a want and in their opinion, not a need. Now, the legislature may feel differently, right? Which is why this is a process that we go through together, and ultimately the legislature approves or denies proposals. So I appreciate that. In terms of how do we know, it's a great question. So typically most projects within BGS are considered a low bid project. And what that means is we put out requests for proposals. It could be for architecture services, engineering services, or for a contractor. And then those parties that are interested in bidding on the projects bid, and we take the low bid traditionally, assuming they've met all the contract requirements, and we check that in advance. We usually take the low bid. Now, there are certain cases where we may do a quality-based bid, and that's because we're looking for a certain level of expertise. A good example of that is correctional facilities and mental health care facilities. We need to make sure we've got a certain level of expertise, both with our design firms and with our contractors, to be able to design and build those buildings, because they're specialty buildings and they have various constraints that general office space does not have. And so there are times where we look at both the cost proposal, that's one part of it, right? And again, we're looking and we rank lower cost higher on the scale, if you will, and we're looking at quality. So what is the quality of the firm that's bidding? They have to give us the team, their experience, and different things like that. And we pair the two together to determine who we should hire to do that piece of the work. The other thing that we do is when we're going along in the design process, the design firm is the one that puts together the project estimate. And they're doing that based on, again, market conditions and trends. And so when they put together an estimate, they're looking at other similar projects and where do those estimates come in and at what point in the market, and then trying to make sure that they're projecting for current conditions. So that there's that check and balance as well. And finally, we also do sort of a square foot cost. And so we collect data about our buildings and we have historical data. And what we do when we get a bid is we compare it and say, okay, is this within a reasonable range, right, for this square foot estimate for different types of projects and buildings, or is it way off? In the case of 108 Cherry that came in at 24 million, we said, I don't know what? We think it's too high. We don't think that's acceptable. And so we're not going to accept the only bid that we have. Now, we know we've got a time clock on that one, and we know we have to address it or the structural integrity of the building could be compromised. However, we're going to go out with a different type of construction method. This will not be low bid. This will be construction manager. So that's going to be both the quality and the price proposal coming together to select the construction manager. But the goal there is we believe by bringing the construction manager in and having them work with the design team, we can come up with a more constructible way, and we can mitigate some of the risks that the contractor is concerned again by pairing the two groups together, the design firm and the contractor. So I agree with you that we need to be very diligent, and we should always be diligent at all times, especially on behalf of the taxpayers, to make sure that we are getting the best price possible. And again, when we feel like we're not, or we're not willing to accept the cost of something, we go and we try a different approach, like we're doing at 108 Cherry, where we're going back out with another delivery method. And so that's the way that we're handling it currently. The only other thing that I will add, because I do have a request that was included in the governor's recommended budget, we are pulling on a new system called Workplace Integrated Management System. And that's going to include it's going to include a capital planning and project management component to that system. That system is going to basically store all of this cost information in it. So over time, now we'll have something, rather than on spreadsheets, we'll actually have an actual system that's monitoring the cost of everything and how it's coming in. So we, again, will be more easily able to compare our estimates to what we're actually getting out in the market. This is something that transportation uses all the time. They have line item and quantities, which is a little different here at BGS because we do square foot costs for the total project. But that's what they do. They log in all this data and this information over time, and they get really accurate on how much that project is going to cost. And we're essentially going to be doing the same thing here at BGS, utilizing that system.
Do we have anything analogous to the Blue Book for buying used cars? You got a car, you know the model, the year, you look it up. And there's a price, that this is the price of that car. And then you deduct from it because of rust or whatever. Do we have anything like that?
There is a similar system, Joe. I can't remember the name, but the estimating system that's out there.
RS means?
RS means,
Yep.
yep. That
You
is
want
correct.
What is it?
You want to speak to that, Joe?
The company is RS Means, and what they do is they go throughout the country and requesting prices from construction firms, design firms, and engineering firms. And so they collect this data on a yearly basis and then put it inside of multiple books and or CDs that allow you to then do your estimating off of. And they range for typical construction, design costs for construction between 10 and 12%. Now, if you go to multi-million-dollar projects, I'm talking 100+ million or more, that percentage actually comes down. But the work that we typically do is in the 10 to 15% range of our projects.
And
Every now and then,
BGS,
one less.
and BGS uses that as a resource?
We do, and I don't know how many times I have used RS Means and have been the low bidder on the job. The problem being is what contractors do is when they're assembling their bids, they're reaching out to their contractors, their subcontractors, and their subcontractor is giving them a price on what they have in front of them today. So if they're busy, their price, their market may go higher. If they really want the work, it could be less. When we open bids, it's amazing sometimes of how different these bid prices come in. We've had projects on our larger projects have $1 million spread. On an $80,000 project before, I've had a $10,000 spread. When we used to do public bid openings, you'd look at each contractor sitting at the table when you open the bid, and they would say, the low bidding guy would go, what did I forget? So it's not an accurate science that you're putting it together. But then I would relate that back to the Blue Book. You go to the Blue Book, you go down and you pick out your 2012 vehicle, and it says it's worth $5,000 if it's in this quality. You go to sell that, and somebody tells you, I'm not paying you that. I'm only, or on trade-in, different cost for trade-in. It's very similar. It's what the market is at the time and who is bringing what to the table. But that is our best guess.
Yeah, well, you're never bound by the Blue Book, just staying with that as an analogy. But
Right.
It is a frame of reference. It's a point.
Right. And so we are using the 10 to 15% as a frame of reference. But when you get into a correctional facility or hardened facilities and or what the typical job is, that percentage can change. So again, with door control, each door has to be assessed. So there's well over 100 doors in just one of the facilities at St. Johnsbury. So that architect looks at the door and assesses whether or not it has to be replaced along with the frame. And then you go back to chasing where that wire goes. So that is, and again, this is my best guess for a project that's going to be bid out in a year or so.
Yeah. Okay. We've got constituents who are convinced they're being ripped off. And I've got to say, intuitively, I'm often shocked at some of the figures.
When
it
is, but I know when we are doing bidding, we're also having, in this case, for a design team, they have to meet certain requirements. They have to have certain insurance. And we also require them to carry a 1-year cost because they come back in 11 months to assess the building for warranty work. So then it's really creating a second list of items that have failed or should be corrected during that time frame. Typically, when you're a homeowner, you're not making them require a $2 million insurance. You're not requiring them to necessarily bid against other firms. A home architect can be less expensive than a commercial architect because of some of the risks that are involved and or the people. A lot of our buildings have steam heat. Steam heat is an art that's going away. It is very difficult to find people. I have had engineers tell me that my mechanical engineer, Tay Southworth, is the best one out there. And so I'm paying an engineer to tell me that, and it's not that great, but that is a lost art. Steam used to be the best way to move heat.
Yeah.
So I understand it. And through the bidding process, we are getting the best price because it is open bid. It's competitively bid.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Joe, I'll just make a comment. We did the construction manager route at the town of St. Albans for our new town hall, which should open another few months. And it's better than when we did the old traditional hire GC to do everything. It's worked out really well. So I support that method as the state looks to deploy it.
Thank you so much for that. Also, I have to say on the record, just because I assume it's a daughter, maybe it's a son. I don't try to make assumptions, but I will say cutie pie on the screen for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, and it's a daughter. So yeah, we love having her.
Congratulations.
So thank you.
He tells him how to vote.
I thought you were talking about Carrie, parent himself.
She looks like her mother, thank God.
Better when his son comes in and he sticks his tongue out at us as he's looking in the screen.
Father tells him to do that.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions? Commissioner, Joe, Eric, thank you all. It was wonderful completion of section 2. How many other sections have we got to go now?
No.
Betty.
Well, for this
covered 'em.
afternoon, we're going to conclude business. Eric, be careful who's lurking in your side screen there.
Yep.
And we will see you all again. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having us
Welcome.
today.